Hello my whittle friends, and welcome back to Woodcrafter's Corner. A few months ago I did a variation on the 5-minute owl using a 1x1 by 6 inch piece of basswood. One of the comments on that video basically let me know that overseas, or out of the country anyway, it's harder to get your hands on some of these pre-made blanks, a lot like this one. And so what I'm doing today is pretty much this exact same thing, but with a much easier to find branch that I found and cut down to I just eyeballed it here. It's obviously a little bit different. This is going to be a little bit different than this one ended up being, but it's going to be a little more natural, and it's from a stick that anybody can go outside and pick up. So let's get right to it. Now, one thing that will be a little bit different about this roughing out stage is that we have all this bark, which, depending on the kind of wood you get, could be nice, could add a little bit of something to your carving. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to leave it as I go, but if you want, you can come in here and just take all this off and make it a little cleaner. It's totally up to you. I'm going to leave it for now. I might end up taking off some more later. The other thing with this is that on this video, if you watched it at all, you might have noticed that I used a pencil to make some marks here to make it a little bit easier to follow. That's going to be a lot harder to do on this one, not only because it's not square, but because it's got no place really for pencil marks to show up. So we're going to kind of eyeball this as we go, and there's nothing wrong with that. The first step is to make a sort of triangle shape, and that is going to look something like this. I'm just using the knife here to make these marks. And we're just using straight lines here because that is going to be what's easy. This is a beginner's project, so the simpler the better. It kind of allows you to get a handle on what carving is like. And you can see on this one, the bark is already starting to peel off, so I have a feeling that it probably won't stick around much longer, and that is okay. And I don't know what kind of wood this is, I'm sorry to say, but it's probably some kind of wood, I would imagine. It's not as easy to carve as basswood, but then not many are, so that is okay. So we're just cutting out this piece that we kind of made a mark for. Basically, we want to start at imagine a midpoint here, and then a kind of triangle shape coming down this way. So I'll see if I can make that a little more obvious here. And you know what? I think I am going to go ahead and take this bark off because it is mostly just getting in the way for me. So let that be an option for you. For me, I do love the rustic look that it can leave, but whatever kind of wood this is making it a little more trouble than it's worth. Alright, that helps a little bit. Get off a couple of knots here. Alright, and you can really see a lot better what my intention here is. So again, kind of picking a midpoint and then just carving the kind of slope. This will end up being the forehead, similar to what we see here. So we want to do a similar thing on this one. Just keep working your way back on this slope. I want it to be, again, right about here when we're done, kind of the midpoint. Alright, that is probably good enough. You can definitely see what we're going for here at least. Now, because we want the face and beak to be a little more pointed, let's take out a little bit of the sides here. But first, let's make a mark showing us exactly, and we should be able to now. Let's try it with this. Oops, that's too much. With this pencil here. Let's say that this is the beak area here. And we're just making rough kind of triangular marks, or a triangular shape out of these straight marks here. And then we know we want the bottom of the head to be kind of around here. And you can see where I'm going with that. Similar. And then we'll make a couple of marks here. Triangle shaped again. We're just keeping basic shapes to keep it easy. And it's kind of hard to have this show up, but if it does show up for you, awesome. If not, no big deal. We're going to come back in and do this better. But anyway, there's that. So let's first make these marks here. Make some deeper, easier to see those. And we'll just make a couple of stop cuts here so you can see that pop out just like that. And that's what we want. I'm going to change this a little bit. Make it a little higher up. There we go. Not bad, but what that now allows us to do is kind of square off these along the lines we made here. So to do that, doesn't really matter which direction you go, but I'm just taking off a tiny amount at a time. You don't want to take off too much. There we go. Trying to make this straight. You can see what's happening there, hopefully. There we go. And I have a feeling this is going to leave us with kind of a cool design. Thanks to the colors and stuff of the wood grain. If anybody does know what kind of wood this is, let me know. Wood identification is not my specialty. Okay, you can see what we're doing here, making a shape of a beak, kind of like this one, but just slightly different. With wood like this, you can see it's not as easy to carve, and so this is where it becomes very important to have a sharp knife. It's actually safer to have a sharp knife because you're not sliding all over the wood, and every cut you make actually digs in. So it allows you to be intentional, which is exactly what you want. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's move on to the next step. We've made these marks here, but we actually want the belly and body area to be narrower than the head. So what we want to do is press down on these marks that we had made. Pretty hard. Not too hard that you're losing control or your muscles start shaking, but just hard enough because we need to come back down on the body and make stop cuts up to the face now, or what will become the face. Just like that. There we go. Now another thing is, as you're cutting more difficult wood like this, it becomes even more important to stop every 15-20 minutes, depending on the type of steel your knives have and how hard the wood is and different stuff, but at least every 30 minutes to come in and strop your tools. Strop the knife, keep that edge, because this can be really hard on it. And you don't want to have it become dull, obviously, and it's way easier to maintain a sharp edge than it is to make one out of nothing. So you can see what we're doing here, just narrowing this out. And then kind of creating a slanted area here so it's not as stark. And similar shape to this is what we'll end up having. So we need to come in along the sides as well. And then I'm gonna go ahead and make this angle just a little bit steeper towards the outside edge here. Just more of an angle towards this direction. I don't know if that makes any sense. Basically making the sides of the face longer is my goal. And that'll lead to a more pointy beak as well. Alright, so here's where we are so far. And I'm going to take this slope and make it just a little bit more of an angle, so a little more back like this, if you will. Let's do that. Easy, just make these cuts a little deeper, and we'll smooth them out. Now let's go back to working on the body here a little bit. So again, we want the overall shape to be like this one, and so that's why I refer to it occasionally here, but it can be a little different. That's totally fine as well, but we do want the body to be separated from the head. So to do that, we still need to make a few more cuts like this. That's good. And then come in at these angles. We don't want to start too far down here when we're coming in for these angles. We want to stay up around here because we do want the body to be distinct and kind of rounded at the belly and chest. We don't want this all to be taken out because then it'll all just be like a cone shape, or a cylinder, I should say. So anyway, bottom line, just stay near the head with these cuts, not going too far down. And just stop when you feel like you've got enough of a separation between the neck or body area and the head. To me, this is looking pretty good. I do want it to be a little bit more even maybe, but that's looking good. So that's where we'll leave it. Now let's move on to the next phase, and that is going to be to make the perch upon which the owl will sit. On this one, it looks like this. So what we need to do is make two diagonal cuts right here and here, and that'll give us a place to hollow it out. And you can just eyeball this however long you want the body to be. I think that looks good, so I'm gonna make my cut here. Try to line it up with this, the point of intersection here, with the beak, or what will become the beak. And then here we go. So that's pretty much it. And then if we take a couple of stop cuts, you can see that come out here and separate. And that gives us something to work with. All right, and then let's make this line that we made earlier just a little bit further out. We want it to be kind of in line with the side of the head here. All of these we want to kind of keep on a similar plane as we whittle, but you can make adjustments as necessary down the road. But this just kind of keeps everything in line. All right, so that's what we're looking at here. Now we've made those stop cuts, but we don't want to go too deep here because much like the head, we want the perch to stand out from the body. So we need to come back in from the other side now and begin to take out these shapes. Those first initial ones that we did are mainly just to kind of show us where our cuts are going to continue, but that's about all we want to do on the base or the perch. So now we want to work on the body. Now that we've got an idea of the big aspects of how we want the owl to look, let's formulate the body here a little bit. So pick the point right in between where you've got the top of the perch and the bottom of the head, right in the middle, and then make a small line. You can use a pencil for this as well if it'll show up on your particular piece of wood, but for me I'm just using the knife, and you can see that line there. And that just informs us as to where the midpoint is. And that might be a little high actually, so I'm going to move it down a little bit. All of this is going to get carved away, so no big deal if you mess up. So I think that looks a little bit better. And the only reason for that is as a point of reference. So what we want to do is start here and work our way up on both sides and then down on both sides inward, so that it kind of makes the body stand out a little bit more. So to do that, just put your knife wherever you think. It doesn't have to be right on the line, but it does, the line again is just for reference. So you can see I'm kind of starting up a little bit higher so that my cuts can be a little bit shallower at first. It's better for safety that way. And we're just working our way up, making an angle here towards the stop cut we made for the head. We'll do the same thing on both sides, and then the bottoms towards the perch. Alright, so after we've made these marks, we can start to see the shape of the body come out. It's time to switch tactics a little bit. Let's switch to the back of the head. So we're going to make a slant here, similar to what we did with the top of the forehead area, and that's going to give us a little less to work with when we start to, well, define the head a little bit more. You'll see what I'm talking about. So we're just cutting this off towards the top, because we're just going to make a similar slant. Doesn't really matter where you start too much. Alright, and as we start to reach the apex here of these two intersecting angles, that's a lot of terminology. I don't even know if it is accurate, but in any case, we want these to meet. So if you need to make this side a little more slanted and this side a little more slanted, or just this one, whatever it is, we basically want there to be no flat plane right here. We want these two to come together at an apex. So whatever it takes to do that, you can choose, but I'm gonna do a little bit of both. All right, so that's pretty close to what I wanted, and that looks good. So now what we can do is we want to kind of make a dip in the top of the head here that will kind of symbolize ears, if you will. So we do have to be very careful as we cut this out. It can be easier to make a cut right here in the middle first, and then cut down to it from either side, like as it is, just a stop cut. Now you do want to take this very slow because it's easy to slip and cut your finger or take out more than you meant. But the goal here is just to make this kind of slight dip in the top of the head, as we start to see here. There we go. Now some of these more difficult to carve angles and different things like that, instead of going just straight across like this, just straight, it can be better to push and slide at the same time. So you probably have seen me do that a few times, but that sliding motion helps just kind of cut through a little bit better. So keep that in mind as you go through. But as far as this goes, that's looking pretty good. You can start to see the owl shape taking form here. Now it's time to move on. One nice thing about having the face done here, at least bark removed, is that we can start to see a pencil mark. So to define the beak a little bit, you want to take the pencil and basically we want to make two vertical lines on either side, not too close to the front, but kind of close. This will define the beak. And then draw another line down to the corner from there. So it'll look like this. There we are. And there we are. That gives us an idea, and we need to take out this part. So all we'll do for that, get a knife, as you might have guessed, and then you can push in from the corner there. Just push in slowly, like that. And we just cut all the way down to the base here, and then we'll do the same thing over here, being very careful to be very controlled. So you can kind of see I'm just looking as I go, making sure everything's still lined up. This will be a lot easier if you have a softer wood. But there you go, you can see what it's looking like. So just keep going. And that's that. Now you can go back over it here real quick to get a little closer to the line that I had made, like that, if you want. But since it's a pencil mark, if you like the way it ended up looking, you can always just erase it. And I'm going to make that a little bit narrower. It's a little bit difficult to do on camera. The angles are tricky. But at the end, it looks like we are good to go. So that's pretty much what you're left with there. You can see the shape coming out. Now you can either scrape this off with a knife or just erase these pencil marks if you have any left over. And that's easy enough. There we go. Now I do see as I went through that this angle's a little less steep than this one is, so you can just come in and do it a little more. All right, there we go. Looking good. Now the next step is to do something very similar to what we did on the top here, except we're going to do it on the sides now. Just make a couple more of those notches on either side at the midpoint. Not too deep, just enough to stop a couple of cuts that you make, and then come in like this. All right, just I like to just have the hint of the angles there, nothing crazy. I do like them to match a little bit better, so I'll come in again. But there we go. Now what you do with the body from here on out is totally up to you. If you like this kind of rustic look with the bark still on there, you can leave it. I'm probably going to end up taking off a little bit more here, kind of rounding it out a little bit better. And so this much is completely up to you. I'm going to take the chest in a little bit here, just rounding things out, basically. That's probably about as much as I'll take out there, but you can do whatever you want. This part is completely up to your creative mind. But I think it'll be kind of cool to leave the belly, or to have the belly's bark taken off, but leave it out here on the sides where you might imagine the wings are. I think that'll look cool, so that's why I'm gonna take off most of the belly here, or all of it. Not taking out much here because I want to keep that rounded aspect a little bit more, but softening the angles we made with our deeper cuts. And there we go. And then I'm going to take off a little more bark here, again just to make it look like a wing, but that's all I'm doing. So there's that. Maybe a little more and match. Okay, that's looking pretty good to me. And then you can narrow the neck a little bit if you want, or leave it. It's totally up to you. I think I like to look at that, the look of that pretty well. Now at this point we can start to add on the details a little bit, and this is the fun part. So you can use a pencil for this just to make sure everything's level and everything that you want. But it's super easy. First draw a couple of kind of eyebrows, and you can start using this cut that we made as the starting point up here, and then just work your way up. So just a single line just to give you an idea, and I just do the pencil mark just to make sure I keep things even, although it is tougher to do on camera. Yeah, that's a little no, that looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna leave that. Maybe just change that just a little bit. So anyways, there you go. And then you will make a couple of eye holes here as well. So I'll make a couple marks like that. And that looks pretty good to me. So then the next step, grab one of your smaller knives if you have one, but anything will work. And then we're going to make a couple of long V cuts. So what that looks like is coming in from the top first, making a long cut, and then switching our angle to like this from the bottom and doing the same thing. We do want to be careful to be controlled here. So you can just run along here, along the mark you made, but very slowly. Better to be controlled. And you can just press in as you go, or you can pull it along if your wood is a little softer. So there's that, and then take the other angle and just meet it. And that is a V cut. That works really well for this. There you go. And then I'm going to come in and do the same thing here now that we've made the deeper cut. And there you have it. And then to make the eye hole even easier, just point the tip in, and then you can either do a triangle shape like this, where you're just making 3 cuts in there, and then just pulling it out. Or you can just kind of drag it around in a circle if your type of wood has dense enough grain that it won't just start splitting apart. That works fine. This one definitely does. I'm so curious as to what kind of wood this is, but I honestly don't know because I just picked it up off the side of the road. Alright, so there's one down, and then we'll do the same thing here. And then same thing here. Looks like an owl to me. The next step, if you want, you can add a few little feather details. I think it won't show up as well if you watch my other video by any chance that you make these kind of U shapes. I don't think it'll show up as well on this one just because the wood is different, but if you wanted to, you could just make a few shapes like this, being careful, and then it kind of pops the wood out here a little bit and looks like feathers sort of. I'm just going to do a couple here because I kind of like the way it looks smooth. This is how you could make a couple of feather looking things. And you could do this all over the front if you like the look. And then take your bigger knife if you switched, and we're just going to make a few V cuts here to symbolize, if you will, the talons of the owl. So there's one. And we're going to do 3 on either side, and it just kind of gives the impression that the owl's feet are showing here. Alright, so that's it for the main part. You kind of get the idea that there are wings back here. That's kind of cool. You could also, if you want, extend these wings out here a little bit by making them look like this, and then just doing a couple of V cuts out like that. I think that looks kind of cool. So I'll do the same thing here. There we go. Last and final step, both last and final, is to shape up the face if you want. We are done technically. This is the 5-minute owl as traditionally done, but with a piece of wood. And so what I like to do though is kind of round this out a little bit. So we have this square shape. You could leave it like this, but I'm going to take off these corners on the beak, just like that, and then just like this. Yeah, so you can see how that kind of gives it a little pointier look that I prefer. And then you can go in on these angles and kind of smooth them out a little bit if you want. Just gives it a little more of a finished look. And so that is the variation on the 5-minute owl using a simple twig, only a little bit bigger. Now, if you like this video, if you found it helpful, fun to watch, any of the above, please leave it a like. It helps me out a ton. And otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.